After 16 years at Lexington and Myers Financial Group, I had lost count of the early mornings, late nights, and weekends spent making this place run. I trained newcomers, patched up colleagues' messes, stayed loyal through hiring freezes and budget cuts. But on that chilly Friday morning, none of it seemed to matter anymore. I sat inside the sleek glass-walled conference room, straight-backed and composed. Across from me sat Lauren Chase, the newly appointed CEO, barely in her mid-30s, flanked by Henry Cross, the HR director with a permanently glazed expression, and my direct supervisor, Brad Kent, whose smirk looked a little too satisfied. Lauren's voice was cool, rehearsed. "Julia, thank you for joining us. I'll get straight to it. As part of our strategic realignment, your role has been deemed redundant." Redundant. The word echoed like a slap. I knew this company better than anyone, from the legacy accounting systems to the hidden quirks of our biggest clients. But I kept my hands folded neatly in my lap. I'd learned long ago that showing emotion in rooms like this never served you. Before I could reply, Brad leaned back and crossed his arms. "We're just trimming the fat, Julia. Making room for fresh energy." Henry flinched, but said nothing. Lauren didn't even blink. From the corner of the room, Sarah Kim, a young analyst who'd been with the firm for 2 years, spoke up. "Please don't take it personally, Julia. It's just business." I smiled politely, despite the pounding in my chest. They had expected resistance. Maybe tears. But I had been expecting this moment for weeks. 3 weeks ago, I had received an internal email by mistake, a forwarded chain revealing Lauren and Brad's plan to quietly phase out senior employees like me, labeling it as strategic restructuring. I spent the nights that followed not panicking, but preparing. Lauren slid a manila folder across the table. "Inside are your severance terms. We'll need your access badge, laptop, and phone by end of day. Your team will be informed this afternoon." Your team. 12 dedicated people I had handpicked and mentored. Many of them leaned on me not just professionally, but personally. The thought of leaving them behind stung more than losing the title. "I understand completely," I replied calmly, picking up the folder but not opening it. "Thank you for the opportunity." Lauren gave a relieved nod, already turning to the next item on her agenda. Brad looked like he'd just won a bet. Henry scribbled something in his notepad. Only Sarah seemed to recognize that something felt off. I walked back to my office, passing another conference room where Lauren's new leadership team was laughing behind glass. I could practically hear Brad bragging about finally getting rid of me. Once inside my office, I locked the door and pulled out my personal phone. I typed a short text. "It's happening. End of day today." The reply came within seconds. "Perfect? Dinner tonight?" I exhaled slowly, feeling the tension start to melt. That night, I drove across the city to a quiet, wood-paneled restaurant far from the financial district. Jazz music floated from the speakers, and soft lighting spilled over dark booths. "Over here," a familiar voice called. I smiled and slid into the booth across from Daniel Morgan, CEO of Crestmont Capital, Lexington and Myers' biggest rival. We'd maintained a discreet professional relationship for years, built on mutual respect and more than a few shared frustrations. He poured me a glass of wine. "They finally did it, huh?" "They did," I replied. "Exactly like we anticipated." He chuckled. Brad was always too arrogant for his own good. And Lauren? I knew she'd pull something like this the minute she replaced Victor. Victor, the former CEO, had his flaws but had always respected my contributions. His early retirement 6 months ago marked the beginning of my quiet phase out. I didn't want to believe it, I admitted, swirling my wine. But when I saw that email chain, I knew it was time. Daniel leaned in. "Our legal team reviewed everything. You're in the clear, Julia. The updates you made to the client's software, you built those at home, on your own time. You've got proof." The knot in my stomach loosened. They had underestimated me, again. "They always do," I murmured. From my purse, I pulled a slim folder and slid it across the table. Inside were technical specs, efficiency reports, and the preliminary patent application, all under my name. Over the past year, I had developed the next-gen version of Lexington's core client management system. Quietly. On nights and weekends. On my own laptop. Daniel skimmed the contents, letting out a slow whistle. You've outdone yourself. Crestmont could roll this out in 1 quarter and crush them. That's not all, I added. I have my team's loyalty. They know how I've been treated. They won't stay after I'm gone. You're not just offering me a product, Daniel said, visibly impressed. You're bringing the talent who built it. I nodded. They deserve better. Dinner arrived, but we barely touched the food. When can you start? He asked. I'll take the weekend to regroup, I said. But we're ready. He grinned. Then Monday, we announced Julia Martin as Director of Strategic Innovation at Crestmont Capital. We'll position it carefully, but the message will be loud and clear. I imagined Lauren's face when she saw the press release. There's one more thing, I said, leaning forward. I've prepared detailed transition docs, every password, every process. I'll leave them behind. Daniel raised a brow. To be nice? To make them realize just how much I held together. He smiled. Poetic. No, I said. Strategic. We clinked glasses. The wheels were already turning. Lauren, Brad, and the others thought they had ended my story today. They had no idea it was just the beginning. Monday morning arrived, but there was no need to rush. For the first time in years, I didn't have to commute to Lexington and Myers. Instead, I stood by my bedroom window, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint soft gold across the skyline. I had always believed in loyalty, in staying the course and earning respect over time. But that belief had been slowly chipped away. And now, for the first time in a long while, I felt something unexpected. Freedom. At exactly 8 a.m., Crestmont Capital's website refreshed. The headline was bold and unmistakable. Crestmont Capital appoints Julia Martin as Director of Strategic Innovation, exclusive rights secured to groundbreaking client portfolio system. It wasn't just a job title. It was a statement, a declaration that everything Lexington and Myers thought they were throwing away had just been claimed by their biggest competitor. The article detailed how I had developed the technology independently, outside of company hours, using personal equipment. It outlined Crestmont's plan to implement the system across its client base, leapfrogging industry standards. Somewhere across town, I knew Lauren and Brad were reading it, probably at the same conference table where they dismissed me. At 9:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Sarah Kim. Julia, what's happening? The office is in chaos. I smiled, typing back. Check your personal email. I had sent every member of my old team a private message over the weekend, each one containing a personal invitation to join Crestmont. Higher pay, better benefits, flexible schedules, and most importantly, real recognition. By 9:17 a.m., another message came in. Miguel Torres. They just called an emergency exec meeting. Lauren looks like she's seen a ghost. I replied with a simple. This is only the beginning. By 10 a.m., the financial world had started buzzing. LinkedIn lit up with industry chatter. Blogs labeled it the Martin maneuver. Analysts speculated on the fallout. Clients began asking questions. At 10:30, my phone rang. I recognized the number instantly. Lauren. I answered calmly. Hello, Lauren. Her voice was tense but measured. Julia, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We'd like to discuss the software you've taken with you. I nearly laughed. I didn't take anything, Lauren. What I built, on my own time, with my own tools, is mine. Section 14 of the employment agreement, if I recall. There was a pause. Then she tried again. Let's be reasonable. Can you come in today so we can? I'm fully booked this week, I said sweetly. But I'm sure our legal teams can chat. I ended the call before she could say another word. At 10:45, Another message popped up. Miguel. Kevin's yelling at IT to check every server. Lauren's locked in her office. Half the team's asking me if they should start job hunting. Me. They won't have to look far. Before noon, nearly every one of my former teammates had accepted Crestmont's offer. Even Sarah, who had looked hesitant in the meeting room Friday, replied. If you'll have me, I'd be honored. Meanwhile, Crestmont's legal team was already fielding licensing inquiries from Lexington's largest clients. The choices were clear: either pay hefty fees to license the system or rebuild from scratch. By lunchtime, Lexington's stock had dropped 6%. Shareholders hate uncertainty, and this was the definition of it. Crestmont's shares, on the other hand, were climbing steadily. Then, another surprise. Brad. He called just after 1 p.m. His voice was strained but trying to sound casual. Julia. Look. We may have acted rashly. Maybe there's still a role for you here. I didn't even try to hide my amusement. Brad, that's kind. But I think you'll be plenty busy. You can't do this, he snapped. You're burning bridges. No, I replied, I'm walking across one you never even saw me building. I hung up and leaned back, letting the satisfaction wash over me. By Tuesday morning, the damage was undeniable. Industry sites were dissecting every angle. Financial commentators speculated on Lexington's future. Clients whispered privately about shifting accounts to Crestmont. And I was exactly where I belonged, sitting in Crestmont's sunlit conference room with my new title, my old team, and a mountain of possibilities. Miguel shook his head as we prepared for our first planning session. You actually pulled it off. I smiled. Now let's make sure it was worth it. At 11 a.m., Daniel walked in, holding a report. The fallout is worse than we thought. 3 of their biggest clients have already reached out to us. I wasn't surprised. They depended on the software I built, on the workflows I'd refined. Without it, their operations were in jeopardy. Later that afternoon, I got a message from an old friend still inside Lexington. David. Emergency board meeting. Brad's pacing. Lauren hasn't said a word since Monday. Henry looks like he's aged 10 years. I forwarded it to Daniel. He chuckled. I almost feel bad. Almost, I agreed. That evening, I met with Denise Tran, one of Lexington's most senior clients. Over salad and iced tea, she got straight to the point. We don't trust their leadership anymore. And without you, the system's unusable. We want to continue, but only if it's through Crestmont. I nodded. You'll be in good hands. Back at Crestmont HQ, Daniel met me at the elevator with fresh documents in hand. More clients lining up. Lexington's bleeding out. I stared at the list. So many of those names were people I had personally supported over the years. This wasn't just revenge. It was rescue. At 3 p.m., another update from David. Brad's blaming Lauren. Lauren's blaming Henry. The board's livid. They're discussing leadership changes. Me. Expected. By Wednesday, Lexington's stock had dropped another 9%. More former colleagues were reaching out to me quietly, asking if Crestmont was hiring. And the best was yet to come. By Thursday morning, Lexington and Myers was a sinking ship, and the world was watching it go down. Financial blogs dissected every rumor. Industry insiders whispered in back channels. Analysts on morning business shows speculated about leadership failures, client exodus, and the catastrophic misjudgment of pushing out one of their most seasoned executives. I sat in Crestmont's 12th floor conference room, the sunlight pouring in through the massive windows. Around me sat the people who mattered most, my team. Miguel. Emma. Jason. Even Sarah. They looked more alive than I'd ever seen them. No one was worried about speaking too loudly. No one glanced nervously over their shoulders. Here, their ideas were heard, valued. Miguel leaned forward with a grin. This might be the most productive week of my career. Emma nodded. Feels like we can breathe again. We were gearing up for our first official planning session for the full rollout of the new client portfolio system, now named Aegis. It was mine, in name, design, and vision. Daniel walked in mid-conversation, holding a fresh report in one hand and a coffee in the other. 2 more of Lexington's legacy clients reached out this morning. They're asking how soon they can migrate to Aegis. I nodded. Let's onboard them next week. I want this to feel seamless, no chaos, no uncertainty. He raised a brow. Already thinking like a real executive. I smirked. Guess it's easier without Brad interrupting every decision. We all laughed, but the truth was sobering. Lexington was unraveling fast. By noon, another 5 clients had contacted Crestmont, each one citing concerns over the instability at their former firm. Then came the message that changed everything. David, 1:03 p.m. Board just announced an emergency press conference at 3 p.m. Rumor, Brad and Lauren are out. I forwarded it to Daniel, who simply wrote back. Ticking clock. At 2:55 p.m., we gathered around the conference room monitor. On screen, a podium stood in front of Lexington's logo. A middle-aged board member with a forced smile stepped up. Effective immediately, he began, Lexington and Myers announces the resignation of CEO Lauren Chase and Head of Operations Brad Kent. We thank them for their service and wish them well. The room at Crestmont broke into quiet applause. I just exhaled. Not out of glee, but closure. After 16 years, they had reduced me to redundant. And now, just days later, their own seats were empty. But it wasn't over yet. By Friday morning, Crestmont's legal team had received a formal inquiry from Lexington's general counsel. They want to talk, Daniel said as he stepped into my office. They're ready to license Aegis. I leaned back in my chair. They'll want it fast. Quiet. Cheap. Oh, I know, Daniel replied. But that's not what they're going to get. Our legal team had everything prepared. Licensing fees retroactive to when they started using my upgrades, ongoing royalties, and public acknowledgement of my sole authorship. We weren't just demanding compensation, we were demanding truth. That afternoon, I met Denise Tran again, this time in Crestmont's main boardroom. As one of Lexington's most high-profile clients, she had insights no one else did. They're in free fall, she told me bluntly. The internal messaging is chaos. They don't know who's in charge. HR's panicking. Half the project managers are threatening to leave. I nodded slowly. And the board? Desperate. They want to settle. Quietly. But the investors are demanding answers. By the time I got back to my desk, I had another message from David. David, 4:42 p.m. New interim CEO announced. They're reorganizing the C-suite. Entire strategy division under review. Word is, they're trying to wipe the slate clean. I typed only. Too late. That evening, Daniel joined me as I overlooked the city from Crestmont's rooftop terrace. We're close, he said. Lexington's team will sign the license terms. But there's one thing they're still pushing back on. I didn't even need to ask. The public acknowledgement. He nodded. They want it buried in legal language. Quiet. Out of sight. I stared out at the skyline. No. They called me dead weight. Let them print the truth. Daniel smiled. I thought you'd say that. Monday arrived with a surprising sense of calm. The news broke just after 9 a.m. Lexington and Myers signs licensing agreement with Crestmont Capital. Publicly recognizes Julia Martin as creator of Aegis portfolio system. It was everywhere, LinkedIn, Bloomberg, even TechCrunch. I opened the press release. Lexington and Myers acknowledges Julia Martin as the sole inventor of the Aegis portfolio management system, developed during her tenure and further enhanced independently. We are grateful for her contributions to the industry and look forward to a productive relationship with Crestmont Capital. Grateful. The word echoed in my mind with all its irony. 2 weeks ago, they escorted me out like I was nothing. Now, they were thanking me, publicly, because they had no choice. Just before lunch, Miguel appeared in my doorway holding a tablet. "Thought you'd want to see this," he said. On the screen was the headline: Lexington and Myers faces investor revolt over mishandled exit of Julia Martin. Board under fire for strategic failures and talent exodus. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Justice didn't always look like punishment. Sometimes, it looked like acknowledgement. A headline. A name in bold. Dead weight? Hardly. 2 weeks after the licensing deal was finalized, I stood in Crestmont's main conference room, gazing out at the city skyline. The ink had barely dried on the final signatures, but the impact was already rippling across the industry. Lexington and Myers had agreed to every term: retroactive licensing fees, ongoing royalties, and most importantly, public acknowledgement of my authorship of Aegis. They didn't do it out of goodwill. They did it because they had no other choice. Behind me, Daniel stepped in with a grin. "It's official. They just posted the statement across all channels. LinkedIn, company site, even internal memos. No more hiding." I turned to face him, the weight of the past 16 years finally lifting. "It's strange hearing them say thank you after everything." "It's not thanks," he said, "it's survival." He wasn't wrong. Their survival now depended on the very thing, and person, they tried to erase. The statement was brief but impossible to misinterpret. Lexington and Myers formally recognizes Julia Martin as the sole inventor of the Aegis portfolio management system, and is grateful for her lasting contributions to the financial technology space. Grateful. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. Only weeks earlier, they were forcing me out. Now, they were singing my praises, publicly, permanently. But the true victory wasn't in the acknowledgement. It was in what we had built, and were still building. Aegis was outperforming every projection. The migration of former Lexington clients was ahead of schedule. Our internal reports showed record efficiency, client satisfaction, and retention. More than that, my team was thriving. Emma now led a sub-team of developers. She had gone from hesitant analyst to confident strategist in less than a month. Miguel was training new hires, mentoring them the way I once mentored him. It was like watching a garden finally bloom after years of drought. That afternoon, as I walked through the development wing, I paused to watch them. They were laughing, arguing, designing, alive in ways I hadn't seen back at Lexington. It reminded me why I had started in this field in the first place. It had never been just about systems. It had been about people. Later that day, Miguel knocked on my office door holding up a tablet. "You'll want to see this." The headline made me laugh out loud. Lexington and Myers faces internal revolt, board under pressure over patent oversight and leadership exodus. The article detailed mounting investor frustrations, declining morale, and increased scrutiny from regulators over how the company had handled my exit and intellectual property. Emma peeked her head in. "The vultures are circling. They'll survive," I said, "but not without scars." We all knew what came next: restructuring, new faces, temporary bandages. But some damage couldn't be undone. Later that evening, I received an unexpected call. It was Denise Tran, not as a client, but this time as a representative from Lexington's legal team. "Julia," she began, her tone uncharacteristically subdued. "On behalf of the current leadership, I wanted to personally apologize. Many of us disagreed with how things were handled. I appreciated the gesture, but I knew what it really was: damage control. I've moved on," I said, keeping my tone even. "And so has my team." She hesitated. "If there's ever a chance for collaboration again." "I think Lexington has some rebuilding to do first," I said, ending the conversation with polite finality. After the call, I walked the quiet halls of Crestmont, pausing by the break room where Emma and Jason were chatting animatedly over a whiteboard. Miguel stood nearby, coffee in hand, watching with pride. This, not headlines, not stock movements, was the real legacy. We had built something together, and we had done it with integrity. Back in my office, I found a handwritten note on my desk. It was from Sarah. "Thank you for showing us what real leadership looks like. Not just vision, but courage." I tucked the note into my drawer, next to a photo of my old team, the one taken during a Lexington retreat years ago, when we still believed we had a future there. Now we had something better, a future we chose. By Friday, Crestmont was leading the financial tech conversation. Invitations to speak at conferences poured in. Aegis had been nominated for an industry award. Recruiters flooded our inboxes trying to poach our team. But no one was leaving. Because for once, everyone felt like they were part of something meaningful. Daniel stopped by my office near the end of the day. "You've changed things, you know," he said. "Maybe," I replied. "But it shouldn't have taken this much." He nodded. "It's not just Crestmont. The entire industry is paying attention. You've made them think twice." I turned back to the window, the city glowing in the sunset. Let them. Maybe next time, they'll remember the value of loyalty and experience before they call someone dead weight. That night, I stayed late, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I walked through the building, checking in on final reports, sending off thank you emails, reviewing the next week's roadmap. Before I left, I looked one more time at the dashboard tracking the Aegis rollout. Smooth integrations. Stable systems. Positive client feedback. Proof, not just of what we had built, but of who we had become. And it wasn't over. Not yet. Monday began like any other, quiet, steady, and full of possibility. I arrived early at Crestmont HQ, coffee in hand, stepping into the lobby just as sunlight poured through the glass atrium. The receptionist gave me a warm smile, and I returned it without thinking. Some habits you don't unlearn. But this wasn't the old world anymore. This was something new. Upstairs, the office buzzed with quiet energy. The team was already in motion, charts on whiteboards, video calls blinking to life, hands flying across keyboards. It was the rhythm of people who had found their place. A team no longer trying to survive, but finally building. My calendar was packed, strategy meetings, onboarding calls with clients migrating from Lexington, a review with our legal team about the final licensing rollout. But the most important part of the day wasn't on the schedule. At 10 a.m., I stepped into a conference room where several members of our Aegis rollout team waited. Emma stood at the head of the table, presenting performance metrics. The improvement rates were staggering: 23% faster onboarding, 40% fewer support tickets, a 17% increase in client retention. When she finished, the room burst into quiet applause. Emma beamed. She deserved every bit of it. As the meeting wrapped, she turned to me. "You gave us this chance." "No," I replied. "You took it. I just made sure you had the space." Afterward, Miguel caught up with me in the hallway. "Have you seen the latest numbers?" "I just did," I said. "And I'm still amazed. We did that in 3 weeks. Imagine 6 months." I smiled. "I am." At noon, I had lunch with Daniel on the terrace. The air was crisp, the city below alive with movement. "Lexington's board released another statement this morning," he said, passing his phone to me. "Lexington and Myers remains committed to rebuilding trust with clients and stakeholders. We are implementing new leadership structures and exploring collaborative opportunities with innovators across the industry." "Innovators," I said, raising an eyebrow. "That's new." "They're trying to save face," he replied. "You've reshaped the conversation. The story isn't just about revenge. It's about what's next." He wasn't wrong. In the beginning, it felt like retaliation, walking away from a company that discarded me. But now, it was something else entirely. Not about what I left behind. It was about what I was building. That afternoon, I reviewed our hiring plan. We were growing fast. Former Lexington employees, ones I'd never worked with directly, were applying in waves. Many were talented, stuck under the same outdated mindset that once labeled me excess. I approved 4 new hires and flagged 2 others for Emma to interview. Then, I wrote a note to our recruiter. Let's prioritize those with heart, the ones who stayed quiet, but never stopped caring. By late afternoon, I received a package on my desk. Inside was a framed plaque from the National FinTech Council. Aegis Portfolio Platform, Innovation of the Year. Julia Martin, Lead Developer. My breath caught. It wasn't the award itself that moved me, it was that someone, somewhere, had seen the truth of what we had done. I placed the plaque next to the photo of my old team, the one taken years ago at Lexington. Funny how things come full circle. Before leaving for the day, I walked through the office one last time, stopping outside the glass-walled Innovation Lab. Inside, Emma was explaining system logic to two new hires. Miguel was sketching a new dashboard concept. Jason and Sarah debated a new client integration. They weren't just building Aegis. They were building legacy. I returned to my office, logged off, and turned out the lights. The sunset cast golden shadows across my desk. I stood there a moment longer, reflecting. Not long ago, I'd been told I was done. Too senior. Too expensive. Too set in my ways. But what they didn't see, what they never understood, was that experience is not a burden. It's a foundation. And now, the foundation was holding something extraordinary. On my way out, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. You probably don't remember me. I was an intern at Lexington back in 2017. You mentored me for a week before I rotated departments. Just wanted to say, what you've done is inspiring. Thank you. I stared at the message, heart full. It was never just about code. It was about people. About helping them see what they were capable of. And maybe now, they could help others see it too. Outside, the city glowed in twilight. The air smelled of spring and possibility. I took a deep breath and smiled. Because despite everything that came before, the betrayal, the departure, the rebuilding, this wasn't an ending. This was the beginning.